While it is possible to make prediction, there is room for error as any other predictive method, such as marketing forecast and economic forecasting. However, with emphasis on the humanistic movement and a more process-oriented astrology, as undoubtedly subconscious influences may play a result in the client's reactions. The real value of astrology is in full understanding of the meaning of events in a subject's life, how to maximize on the potential of a situation, view it as an opportunity for growth rather than a negative occurrence. Astrology reinforces the idea and philosophy of the individual growing and evolving in the process of individuation as coined by Carl Jung.
Try to do things that will be as interesting and as exciting and as legitimately astrological as they can be, which will make their trip worthwhile. In other words, I don't think I can tell somebody something that I don't think is possible, but I can also reframe their lives and reframe their understanding of certain circumstances to give them something that they may not have expected to find. You see, astrology is a tool with incredible resources that 99% of us are not using with our clients. The thing that astrology can give an individual is the possibility of individuation. Now, Carl Jung talked about that in his psychology. He thought psychological work would give people the power of individuation. And I think astrology offers that to people so that we can take ourselves out of what might be called that matrix of habits, that cultural matrix, which is doing what every American guy does or every American girl does, and really looking at our lives as an individual. Some of us have different learning styles. Some of us have different faculties in terms of professional work. Some things are very destiny. There are some destinies in life that I think we could tap into more frequently than we do. Now that sounds a little bit too predictive, but I can promise you that some people, let's put it this way, if a person has been a successful businessman and he loses everything he has at age 40, you can probably be absolutely certain that by age 48 he's going to be successful again, because he's got a destiny to be successful in business. The same thing is true with people in marriage. Some people really have a destiny to have happy marriages, and that's the way it is, and they're fighting some other problems, but so the idea of destiny is part of astrology, but we can't walk there too carefully, too quickly, because then we're going to really collide with our basic democratic backdrop here, rather than just going through the steps of doing what you're expected to do because you're an American guy. You go through grade school and high school and college, and you get a career. And at some point, you have to start looking at, well, who am I? I'm not going to be satisfied with the things that my neighbor's doing, or might not be satisfied with doing the same thing. I really have to figure out who I am and where I can really give my life an individual something. Many times we do it through a work. Sometimes we do it through our relationships. Sometimes we do it through the communities that we live in. Location is very important, as you learned with Chris, that life offers. You sort of sort things out. Right? And once you get a person to start to sort things out in his or her life, then they begin to have experiences that they were not able to have when they had it cluttered full of all kinds of predictable stuff. Okay, did you get the picture? And as that person becomes less cluttered, sort things out, has different experiences, there's an evolving process which allows that individual to do things that he could not do if he were just living in.
While astrology has had a long history in the West, it marries best with an Eastern philosophical point of view. Western thinking predominantly identifies a cause and effect thinking style, while Eastern thinking relates to more correlative thinking. A definition of astrology according to Webster's dictionary is defined as the divination of the supposed influence on the stars and planets on human affairs and terrestrial events by their positions and aspects. To a modern humanistic definition, this is inaccurate since it holds the viewpoint that the stars do indeed have a cause and effect relationship on humans. In a humanistic humanistic view, there is a synchronization, a matching movement, as above, so is below, a repeated pattern and rhythm to life in the stars and life on Earth. And this is related to interconnectedness with the rest of the world, yet we are still masters of our own destiny. Jung had published a book known as Synchronity, which greatly influenced this viewpoint. In his publication, he identified there were no casual coincidences. An example would be when we were thinking about a certain song and turn on the radio and that song is playing, or when thinking about a certain person and that person calls. Astrology matches that rhythm and pattern of meaningful coincidences, matching these correlated movements to life on Earth. Yet we do know scientifically there is a correlation between the moon and the movement of the tides, as magnetic fields are responsible for their motion. With our bodies at around 65% water, why would these effects be limited to the water in the ocean? In fact, the word lunatic comes from the recognition that the full moon, Luna, makes people anxious and excited. Astrology doesn't seek to explain the phenomena on how there can be a synchronization, but rather it acknowledges that there is in fact a correlated relationship. This is compatible with the spirit of thinking that has flourished in Eastern philosophy, such as Taoism, Buddhism, and Hinduism.
I think astrology is much more compatible with the philosophy of Eastern thought that deals with the continuity of the soul than it is with Western thought, or I should even say Christian thought, that you have a birth, a life, and a death, and then you go to heaven. And that's it. You don't come back, or you go to hell, whatever the case is. Astrology is much more compatible from a philosophical point of view, in my opinion, with the idea of reincarnation and soul continuity. Because if you believe that every moment of time does have a quality and it can be read in a horoscope, then it's not an accident the moment that you're born. You know, you're you because you're born in a specific moment that has a quality to it. And that shows in a horoscope. Every horoscope is different unless two people are born at the same time in the same place. And, yes. And it's not surprising, therefore, that most astrologers that I know, and I know a lot of them, have studied Eastern religion. They have studied Eastern thought, Far Eastern thought, because it is a philosophy that is supportive of astrology. The Judeo-Christian Western philosophy is not quite so supportive. You know, the idea that that the chart is happenstance. When you say the birth is just a coincidence, well, it doesn't lend itself to believing in astrology. That you're born just because you're born and that's it. And you're going to die when you die and that's it. And there's no real meaning to those events.
And the planets are in some way wedded to, and again, often wrongly assumed to be determinants. So as long as astrology was operating in a primitive deterministic model, then there was this assumption that the planets determine behavior or determine events on Earth. Now, if in the deistic view, God is the ultimate clockmaker, is very compatible with a reincarnationist framework. If you don't at least consider the possibility of reincarnation with astrology, you're left with some kind of fatalistic, deterministic system. In other words, when you're entertaining the question of causality, you know, what is the relationship between psyche and cosmos? You can look at that. You can address that question from a variety of different perspectives. If you look at it from a Western scientific perspective and a one-life perspective, then it seems to suggest that the planets are causative in some way. In other words, there's like a linear causality model that is imposed on astrology, and it then makes it look like somehow the planets out there are electromagnetic or gravitational, or there's some sort of mysterious